The White House has retracted a statement made by President Joe Biden during a speech in the US state of Massachusetts. The president was discussing the effects of oil refinery emissions when he indicated he had cancer.
And guess what? The first frost, you know what was happening? It had to put on their windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer.
The White House then clarified that the president had non-melanoma skin cancer before taking office last year. Let's go live to Washington now. Our correspondent for The Australian, Adam Crichton, joins us. Adam, good to see you. I just don't even know where to start with all of that.
No, I know. I didn't
how
either.
has that gone down in the United States? I have to watch that over and over again to work out what he's actually saying and how it was relevant to where he even was.
Well, look, of course, the sentence really made very little sense. And, you know, the fact he said he had cancer very clearly, too, I think it's just part of a general decline of his cognitive ability. I mean, that's not the only example. And, you know, in the 14, 15 months I've been following his remarks closely, it's getting worse and worse, I tell you. And if it continues at this rate, I mean, by the beginning of 2024, he won't make any sense at all. So it is somewhat concerning. And, you know, you can just feel the embarrassment amongst his advisors in the White House about it. And of course, it overshadowed the point of the speech, which was to talk about climate change. Not that there was anything much concrete in the speech, but nevertheless, it was a speech that was meant to rally the left of the Democratic Party by declaring the climate crisis an emergency and an existential threat.
Well, Americans are really distracted by their own problems at the moment, and that is driven by inflation, the cost of living. So I guess the one perhaps saving grace of the president is that they are distracted. But is this kind of thing going to permeate through, be a feature of the midterms?
What the
both.
President's mental state, you mean? Well, certainly,
and the president's mental state.
If you ask Americans, it's quite interesting. I mean, this question now is a part of routine surveys in the US. Almost every major poll has a question asking Americans if they think the president is mentally fit. And extraordinarily, more than 50% say no, which is an extraordinarily sad indictment. So certainly that is a bad sign for the midterms and also
here, Adam.
For the 2024 election.
This question is in the poll, but how many people say no, he's not mentally fit, but would still vote for the Democrats?
Well, I mean, I don't know precisely that figure, but I assume quite a large chunk, because most Democrats, even though they think he's not a great choice and they think he's mentally unfit, they will still vote for him if he ends up being the candidate, which he insists that he will be. Although, as you know, there's speculation all the time that, you know, that he won't be, and indeed that he simply can't be because of his mental state. But, you know, the Democrat bench, if you like, is extremely shallow, very short. There aren't many people there who the hardheads in the party think could win it. And so it may well turn out that Biden is the one, but it's going to be somewhat of a weekend at Bernie-style election, I think. Wow.
So given the climate crusade in the US and the soaring cost of energy, where is that debate ending up right now?
Well, it completely dominates the polls. I mean, 80% of Americans say it's the #1 issue, and it overshadows everything else, whether it's abortion rights or gun rights. And of course, both of those things have been in the news for big reasons recently, but they haven't really cut through in the way the Democrats at least had hoped. I mean, just on the abortion issue, there was an expectation that there'd be a huge public outcry and maybe protests along the lines of what we saw here in 2020, but that simply hasn't happened. And it's just not registering in the polls. People are concerned about prices, and, you know, quite understandably. I mean, we've had inflation over 8% here for about 5 or 6 months now. You know, that hasn't happened since the late 1970s, early 1980s. So essentially half the country have no memory of inflation like that. So it is quite a shock. And, you know, wages here are going up at 4.5% or 5% a year. So you know, real incomes, if you like, are falling very rapidly. And it's essentially the biggest fall in living standards in almost half a century in the US. So that's obviously going to distract the electorate.
There was some talk that Donald Trump may use the midterms to either announce that he was going to run for president again, or at least tease that. What do you think?
Well, he's been teasing it for some time now. I mean, he sometimes calls himself the 47th president when he's playing golf. Look, I mean, personally, I think it would be a disaster if he does do that before the midterm elections. It's the last thing that most Republicans, I think, would want, because they'd suddenly have to be answering questions about their fealty to Donald Trump, about January the 6th, about the stolen election, when, of course, they would much rather be talking about inflation. But Trump is concerned that some of the other Republicans who are interested, such as the Florida governor, that they're getting traction, and that Trump needs to say that he's going to run now to snuff out the competition. So we'll see. Look, I mean, it would still surprise me if he declares now. There's been no president, as far as I know, in American history who has declared so early, or presidential candidate, I should say, who has declared more than 2.5 years before the vote. But, Donald Trump, has broken a lot of records, so maybe he will.
Yeah, he doesn't really follow the rules, does he? So who knows? We'll keep a close eye on it. Now, you've got a great read on these things. The RBA and all Australians are really looking at what's going on in America, in the economy. Jerome Powell and economists have talked about the R word, recession. What's your read on things, Adam?
Well, look, some people say that we are already in a recession, but I think that's an abuse of the word, because unemployment is still so low. It's 3.7 or 8 here, 3.5 in Australia. So I think when you're at those levels, you can't seriously say that you're in a recession. But that doesn't mean that we won't be in the next 12 months. I mean, about half of serious economists think that we will be. And frankly, if the Fed and the RBA do lift rates to 4 or 5%, that is extremely high, especially with the current level of debt we have in both household and government sectors. So I would expect some sort of hard crash if that happens. But I tend to think that the central banks will essentially chicken out, that they won't do that, because, well, because of the political pushback from governments. Ultimately, they are government entities, and even though they might be technically independent, they're still very wary of public opinion and also what their political masters think.
Indeed. Adam, thanks so much. We'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Laura.